Plot summary. The Tulliver family lives at Dorcott Mill, located outside of the town of St Ogg's and along the River Floss. Of the two children, the dark-haired Maggie Tulliver is smart and impulsive and differs greatly from her blonde and superficial mother, who is often frustrated with her. Maggie's father is tender toward her and often takes her side. But it is her brother Tom who Maggie looks up to most. She finds her greatest happiness in Tom's affection and suffers dramatically when they argue. Though he is not as smart as Maggie, Tom is sent away to school. Mr. Tulliver does not want his son to go into business and become at least as educated and respectable as the lawyers, who he despises. He quarrels with his wife's family, greatly offending the oldest sister, Mrs. Glegg. Mr. Tulliver is a proud man and hates being in debt to Mrs. Glegg. He is determined to pay back her £500, even if he has to ask his impoverished sister, Mrs. Moss, for the money that he owes her. In the meantime, he initiates a lawsuit against a neighbour over water rights and worries about the power of the lawyer Wakem. Tom attends school at the home of a clergyman named Mr. Stelling. The only other student there is Philip Wakem, the son of Mr. Tulliver's enemy. Though suspicious of each other, the boys form a tentative relationship. Maggie comes to visit and forms a stronger friendship with Philip, who she sees as her intellectual equal. She is later sent to boarding school, but is called home when Mr. Tulliver loses his lawsuit. He is now bankrupt and gravely ill. Tom also returns home to support the family. The mill and all its contents are put up for auction, and Mr. Wakem buys the mill and agrees to keep Mr. Tulliver on as the manager. The next several years are very difficult for the Tullivers as they work to repay their debts. Tom's childhood friend, Bob Jakin, tries to make Maggie feel better by bringing her books. One of them is a religious text that inspires Maggie to live a life of self-denial. She meets Philip Wakem by chance on one of her walks, and they renew their friendship. He convinces her not to live such a closed life, and the two meet secretly over the next year. Eventually he confesses his love to her. Maggie is surprised, but ultimately says that though she loves him back, the feud between their families means they can never be together. Tom discovers the relationship and makes Maggie swear to never see Philip again. During this time, Tom has entered into a business venture with Bob Jakin and is able to save enough money to pay off the family's debts. Mr. Tulliver is overjoyed, but goes into a rage when he sees Mr. Wakem on the road. He beats the lawyer violently and falls ill. He dies the next day. Maggie is determined to be independent and take a job in another village. She eventually returns to visit her cousin Lucy Dean. Everyone is surprised by what an elegant, beautiful woman she has become, and Maggie enjoys a period of comfort and luxury at the Dean house. The rich and handsome Stephen Guest is courting Lucy, and both are close friends with Philip Wakem. Maggie asks her brother's permission to see Philip again at Lucy's house. He agrees reluctantly, and the two become friends again. Lucy schemes to persuade Mr. Wakem to sell Dorcott Mill back to Tom. It would help him overcome his hatred for the Wakems and allow Maggie and Philip to marry. In the meantime, Stephen and Maggie experience a growing attraction for each other, although they both fight against their feelings. She becomes overwhelmed, however, and makes plans to escape St Ogg's again. She goes to her aunt's, where Stephen arrives to confess his love for her. Lucy has no idea, and still tries to get Maggie and Philip together. She plans a last boat trip. Philip, however, has guessed the situation between Maggie and Stephen and cancels, sending Stephen in his place. Not knowing this, Lucy goes ahead of the boat, accidentally leaving Stephen and Maggie alone together. Stephen rows Maggie far past their meeting point with Lucy and begs her to run away with him. The weather turns bad and they have gone too far. They board a larger boat bound for the town of Mudport and spend the night. The next day, Maggie refuses to marry Stephen and sends him away. She finds her own way back to St Ogg's. Back in St Ogg's, the incident causes a great scandal and Maggie becomes an outcast. Her brother rejects her, and Maggie goes to live with Bob Jakin. She takes a job working as a governess for the children of the local clergyman, Dr. Ken. Feeling alone and wretched, she is encouraged by a letter from Philip and a visit from Lucy. Both say they forgive her. Stephen eventually sends her a letter renewing his wish to marry her. She is tempted to accept, but she instead vows to stay true to Lucy and Philip. Just then, water from the river Floss enters the room. There is a great flood. Maggie takes one of the Jakins' boats and rows with great strength toward Dorcott Mill. She finds the house nearly under water, but rescues her brother Tom. They row down the river to find Lucy, but the boat is struck by debris and turns over. Maggie and Tom drown in each other's arms. Years later, Philip, Lucy and